the opening to Art Impossible, and I talk about how I have spent my career sort of studying people who have accomplished capital I Impossible, that which has never been done. And I've looked at this in sort of every field, in sports and science and art and technology and business and so forth. And there's also small I Impossible, which is all the stuff that we believe is impossible for ourselves. Mm. So the example I give in the Art of Impossible, the small I Impossible, is I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and I wanted to be a writer from pretty early on in my life, definitely like before I got to high school. And Cleveland in the 70s was a blue collar steel mill town, right? It was very working class. And I didn't know any writers. My parents didn't know any writers. I didn't know how to become a writer. There was no path. I had this dream, but it's a small I Impossible because there was no clear path between where I was and where I wanted to go. And statistically, really bad odds of success, right? Like, it's hard to become a writer, a successful writer. And so that's what I mean by small I Impossible. And I always, in my experience, after doing this for a lot of decades at this point, I've met almost nobody, with a couple of like, I'm going to break a world record exceptions. Anybody who's like gone after capital I Impossible. What usually happens is you start going after small I Impossible. You're like, oh shit, I could do that. Oh wow, look. And it just, one thing leads to the next, and leads to the next. And in the end, oftentimes this big capital I Impossible that people from the outside look at and go, oh my God, that's amazing. From the inside, when you're in the room or when it happens, people often don't even notice because it's just the thing that comes next. It's, it looks huge and dramatic on the outside when you look in, but from the inside, it's just like, this is the next step, and this is the next step, and this is the next step. And it's interesting. One of the obviously becoming a professional writer was a very big deal. Getting into graduate school, because so this is a really weird story, but I was, almost everybody who could have said, don't be a writer, tried to fail me my senior year in high school, because my senior thesis, which is a collection of poems, offended people. I was a punk rocker, and it was my yeah. So I offended, and they tried to fail me. I had to go to war to win that one. When I went to as an undergraduate, I was thrown out of my creative writing department for a number of different reasons. One, I was a punk rocker, and I had this bad habit of like telling the truth, which is a bad thing apparently, especially in the creative writing program. But they asked me to leave, mostly because I was doing really cutting edge stuff with words, and they didn't have anybody in the department who did that kind of stuff. And they actually, to their credit, they hired a couple people and invited me back a couple years later.
Oh, wow.
Once they changed the department. But it took me forever to get into graduate school. And I decided I was only going to go to Johns Hopkins because a guy named John Barth was there. And he was the godfather of a writing genre known as American metafiction. And that's what I was trying to do. And I figured nobody else knew what I was doing. And I was like, I will go to Hopkins because Barth will know, and he'll be able to tell me if I have any talent or if I should just quit. Because everybody else keeps telling me to quit, but they don't know what the hell I'm doing. Right? Let me find the one guy who will understand what the hell I'm doing. And if he thinks I have talent, great, this is my job. And if he tells me I don't, I'm out. And it took like 3 years to get into Hopkins because there's like 9 spots in the program, and 5 of them go to alumni and 3 of them go to like senators' daughters. And so there's like 2 spots that are actually open to the public. And it took a really long time. That was a big hurdle for me, because and when I got to grad school and Barth actually loved my writing and ended up blurbing my first novel, those were big, because it's hard to, as you're coming up as a writer. I wasn't in New York, I was on the West Coast, and I wasn't in that milieu, and it was hard to figure out, am I any good? Is this what I should do? Those kinds of questions. But I will also say, and then we can